Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are diving into a text that honestly is usually glossed over just because of its size. But I promise you, it punches far above its weight class. We are exploring the book of Jude. Now, Jude, who actually identifies himself as a servant of Jesus Christ and a brother of James, originally sat down to write this nice, celebratory letter about shared salvation. But suddenly, the tone shifts completely. It becomes this intense, high-stakes defense against spiritual corruption and internal rebellion. Basically, this isn't just a polite letter to the early church, it is a battle cry. Listen up, you who claim to walk in the light while coddling darkness in your secret thoughts. How long will you play the hypocrite, using the scandalous grace of God as a cheap shield for your own self-indulgence? You boast of your freedom, yet you're completely enslaved to your base desires. Man, you can just feel that graphic novel-style urgency in that diatribe, right? It's directly inspired by Jude's actual warnings. He is aggressively unmasking individuals who have slipped into the rows of the faithful, wearing these masks of piety, while their hearts are just hoarding rebellion.
So, to really understand what we're dealing with, here is our map of the battlefield. We're going to trace the crisis from the first century church, unpack the philosophy behind the rebellion, look into the cosmic war Jude describes, analyze his brilliant literary structure, trace the echoes of ancient judgment, and finally get to his ultimate rescue plan. Let's just get right into the crime scene.
Starting with part 1, the first century church crisis, and unmasking those secret intruders. So Jude is forced to abandon his original, friendly letter, and instead, he gives his readers this very explicit charge to contend earnestly for the faith that was once for all entrusted to God's holy people. Now, what's really fascinating here is the intense philological weight of that phrase, contend earnestly. The original language isn't passive at all. It implies an agonizing athletic struggle. It's a fight. Jude is demanding a robust, intellectual, and spiritual defense of the faith against ungodly individuals who had secretly slipped into the community. This was a severe red alert crisis for the first century church. Which brings us to part 2, antinomianism versus true grace, or the philosophy of the rebellion. To really grasp the theological and philosophical rot at the core of this rebellion, we have to talk about a concept called antinomianism. Essentially, this is the belief that moral laws are no longer binding under the covenant of grace. These intruders were taking the grace of God and perverting it into a license for total immorality. And honestly, this perfectly illustrates a timeless problem, doesn't it? We see this exact same distortion mirroring cultural shifts today, where the really beautiful concept of liberty gets twisted into a justification for complete self-indulgence and a total rejection of authority. So, the crucial takeaway here is how Jude contrasts this. On one hand, you have the intruder's false grace, which is really just hijacked, cheap grace used as a shield for sin. By living this way, they're essentially denying Jesus Christ as their sovereign and Lord through their actions. But on the other side, Jude presents true grace. And genuine grace doesn't liberate a person to sin, it actively transforms their behavior. The intruders love to boast about their freedom, but as Jude so sharply points out, they are completely enslaved to their own fleeting impulses. To really drive this home, Jude relies on some incredibly vivid, devastating natural metaphors. He describes these false teachers as waterless clouds blown about by the wind, promising refreshing rain but leaving the ground parched and dead. He also calls them fruitless autumn trees and wild waves of the sea. These poetic images are just striking. They expose the intruders as people who promise massive spiritual insight but produce absolutely nothing of spiritual substance. Their so-called liberty, it's just destructive chaos. From those earthly metaphors, Jude aggressively expands the battlefield in part 3, Cosmic War and the Apocrypha. Now, this is where things get really wild. Jude relies heavily on non-canonical Jewish apocalyptic literature, meaning texts that sit outside the traditional Old Testament canon. For instance, he explicitly quotes the book of Enoch to describe the Lord coming with thousands of holy ones to execute judgment. He also casually drops a reference to a cosmic dispute between the archangel Michael and the devil over the body of Moses, an account that comes straight from the Assumption of Moses. Why would he do this? Well, by weaving these highly popular first-century texts into his letter, Jude escalates the stakes tremendously. He's establishing this massive cosmic backdrop to show that their local church dispute is actually a frontline skirmish in an ancient, ongoing spiritual war. To deliver that cosmic warning, Jude relies on part 4, the architecture of urgency, using triads, chiasmus, and metaphors. Jude packs a massive punch into just 25 verses, and he does it through incredible literary structure. The entire letter is packed with groups of 3. You've got 3 opening blessings, mercy, peace, and love. 3 historical judgments, Egypt, the angels, and Sodom. 3 wicked prototypes, Cain, Balaam, and Korah. And he wraps it up with a threefold strategy for spiritual growth. By constantly using this rule of 3, Jude is subliminally reinforcing to his readers that their opponents are consistently arrogant, self-serving, and divisive. And it's not just triads. He utilizes an elegant chiasmus. Now, if you're not familiar, a chiasmus is a literary structure where concepts are repeated in reverse order, which creates this really concentric, rhythmic momentum. This precise rhetorical structure isn't just Jude showing off his writing skills. It is highly calculated to shock the audience out of complacency. By creating this tight, rhythmic drumbeat throughout the text, Jude frames apostasy not as some minor theological disagreement over dinner, but as a fatal spiritual emergency that demands immediate action. And that rhythmic drumbeat leads us right into part 5, echoes of ancient judgment and a clear trajectory of ruin. Jude traces a historical timeline to prove that contemporary rebellion always follows the exact same ruinous trajectory as the past. I mean, do these false teachers honestly think they're the one exception to the eternal laws of divine justice? Jude reminds his audience, think about the Exodus, where God delivered the Israelites from Egypt, but later destroyed the unbelievers in the wilderness. Think about the ancient past, where radiant angels grew bored of their assigned boundaries, abandoned their proper dwelling, and were bound in everlasting chains. Think about the patriarchal era, where Sodom and Gomorrah burned for their perversion. The point is, nobody, not rescued Israelites, not radiant angels, not ancient cities, is an exception to divine law. He then directly links the secret intruders to 3 specific historical prototypes of rebellion. He essentially says, you follow the murderous entitlement of Cain. You rush headlong into Balaam's error, literally compromising the truth for petty material gain. And you stage silent mutinies like Korah, despising legitimate authority just because your ego can't stomach being told what to do. These aren't just ancient campfire stories. To Jude, they are the exact blueprints the false teachers are using to build their own destruction. Finally, after this intense trajectory of ruin, we reach part 6, survival, mercy, and doxology, the ultimate rescue plan. Here, Jude gracefully pivots. He de-escalates that fierce tone of condemnation and lays out a crystal-clear 3-step pastoral survival guide. He reminds them that the apostles already predicted scoffers would arise, driven by their own ungodly desires. So, how do you survive them? Step 1, build your life on the rock-solid foundation of your most holy faith. Step 2, ignite your prayer life through the power of the Holy Spirit. And step 3, anchor your drifting soul by keeping yourselves in God's relentless love. But, Jude doesn't just want them to focus entirely inward. He gives them outward pastoral commands as well. He aggressively urges the community to rescue the vulnerable. They need to have mercy on those who are wavering under the crushing weight of doubt. They are commanded to literally snatch others out of the spiritual fires of deception. And all the while, they have to maintain absolute personal purity, pulling the weak away from danger without getting burned or corrupted by the false teachings themselves. It's a high-wire act for sure. And this brilliant, heavy letter concludes with one of the most famous and majestic doxologies in the entire New Testament. Jude wraps up this intense narrative arc of cosmic warfare and internal rebellion by pointing his readers back to their ultimate hope. He tells them to rely wholly on the only true God who possesses the absolute power to keep you from stumbling and to present you blameless before his glorious throne with exceeding joy. In the end, despite all the chaos of the false teachers, the ultimate power to preserve the faithful belongs entirely to God. So, as we wrap up this explainer on the book of Jude, I want to leave you with this thought. We've seen the cosmic stakes, the architectural brilliance of his warnings, and the undeniable ruin of those who twist grace into a license to sin. If even radiant angels couldn't escape the consequences of crossing divine boundaries, how will you guard your heart against casual compromise today? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating text with me. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next one.